And we are going to start with what everyone's talking about, the Euro Cup. After much jubilation and heartbreak after Italy beat England 3-2 in a penalty shootout, there was also outrage after England's black players faced horrible racism online for missing the penalty kicks. So much so that Prince William and Prime Minister Boris Johnson came out in condemnation. So what did you think of the game and everything that went down afterwards?
Oh, this is a tough one. A lot of people are chiming in on social media, as you said, Cyn, and Christina on Twitter wrote to us and she writes, I think England fans need to be held accountable for their ruthless behavior towards players and other fans. But overall, I'm really happy that Italy won the cup. They had a really hard year and a half with the pandemic. So it's good to see that this win will lift the country's spirits up. I think, Christina, you kind of point to the good and the ugly that comes along, I think, with any sport. And the ugly, unfortunately, is what we are seeing play out on social media predominantly, which is all the racism that has been lobbied toward those three players. You know, the flip side to this is that there is a celebration happening, particularly in Italy. And Christina, you said it. Italy was one of the hardest hit countries in the earliest days of this pandemic. I can't forget a lot of the images that I saw on the news of so much death and destruction and during the pandemic. And this was Rome last night. And after 16 months of just so much dread and just terrible news, quite frankly, the other side to sport, even though there is that us versus them mentality, is that it is also can be a great unifier and bringing the community together. And probably what I felt watching that footage was a collective release. And that wasn't just Rome. That was the Italian diaspora. I mean, my in-laws are in Woodbridge, which has such a huge percentage of the population that is Italian. We were in Woodbridge watching the game and with the celebrations that ensued. And it was really nice. I'm not going to lie. It was noisy yesterday, but it was so, like, just such a change of the heaviness that I think so many of us have been feeling for a year and a half. So, you know, there's the good, the bad, the ugly.
I go ahead, Cynthia.
Well, I obviously didn't watch, but I mean, I understand that. I'm part Italian, and I get the idea of experiencing kind of like a collective joy when your sports team wins that represents a sort of national pride. I get that. But I mean, I also couldn't help but sort of become transfixed with the darker sides of the story. You mentioned, Mel, the horrible racism that was happening online. And I mean, not only racism, which is a huge issue, but there's also a domestic abuse story that was going on. I wasn't aware quite until yesterday about how bad the association is between big sports events and the aftermath among women and children who experience domestic abuse. It's apparently, data shows, regardless of the outcome, whether you win or lose, a team win or lose, domestic violence spikes. So basically, they looked back to 2010 World Cup and found that domestic violence leaped 27.7% when England won. And then it went to 33.9 increase recorded when whomever lost. So these stats are not confined to England nor to the sport of soccer. And I just think, like, obviously there are tons of fans who had a great time last night, who celebrated respectfully, who also, like, where I've heard stories online of people being like, oh, well, your team lost. Like, it's okay. It was a really tight game, like, very supportive. But there's also this other piece, the racism piece, the domestic violence piece, that I think big sports fans need to start looking at and addressing.
Well, that's interesting you say that, Cynthia, because I think what you're suggesting is that isn't new. That the fact that hooliganism and racism in sports go kind of hand in hand. It goes back decades. Like, I think you'd be hard pressed to find a year, at least over the last 2 or 3 decades, where there hasn't been like a story about a banana being thrown on a pitch or thrown on an ice rink when there's a player of color. And after that happens, there always seems to be like a think piece that comes out that says, that examines it and is sort of shocked by it. Like, I can't believe that this has happened, and this is not the game that I know. Well, the record kind of shows otherwise. You know what I mean? I don't know how to fix it, because it's such an ugly storm of all of these things, of racism, of xenophobia, of toxic masculinity, of stupidity. And I don't know how you fix that, but I will say that it is it is, I guess, positive that people, particularly people in power, are calling it out more.
I think that's a really good point, Jess. Like, you know, the reaction yesterday in England was like, this is not our sport. And it actually is. And, you know, we do this in Canada too, right? And we are reckoning with it right now, especially with Indigenous people and what this country has done, the genocide that Canada has committed against Indigenous people. When people are like, this is not Canada. Actually, it is Canada. And actually, it is England. It is every institution. There are major institutions in England, two of them being football and royalty. And, you know, in royalty, they failed their black member of the family, and in England in football, they're failing their black young talent. And they're going to have to deal with it at some point because these players, you know, Sterling, Rashford, Saka, they're the future of English football. So I wonder, like, what they are actually planning. What action are they actually taking to make sure that these players feel safe and encouraged and protected? As for the institution of football, period, if we just want to for a second take it to sports like principles, I don't think a championship final should be decided by penalties. Can I just put that there? Forza Italia. Forza Italia all the way. You know, Azzurri, amazing. Good for you. But should a final game be decided on penalties? Come on now.